Arizona Territory, 1879, the wind carried dust across the empty plain like it was trying to bury the past. Isaiah Thorne pulled his horse to a stop just outside the broken fence line where no cattle had roamed in years. He had not meant to be this far off the trail, but the storm last night had flooded the creek bed and washed out the road. He was riding west toward Yuma, chasing a lead on a stolen mare, when he saw the pinewood box sticking up crooked from the dirt near the edge of an old churchyard, half covered in tumbleweed. The lid was cracked. Isaiah dismounted, boots crunching over dry grass. He had buried enough men to recognize a coffin when he saw one, and this one had not been buried right. Something about it pulled at him, made his chest tight. He bent low and brushed his hand over the lid. The boards moved, then he heard it, a faint, rattling breath. He shoved the rest of the weeds aside, heart hammering, and pried the lid open fully. Inside, curled tight like a trapped animal, was a woman. Her skin was pale, lips blue, dress torn and dirty. Her fingers were scraped raw from clawing, her eyes opened. "Isaiah," she whispered. "You came." Isaiah staggered back like he had been kicked in the chest. She knew his name. "Jesus," he muttered under his breath, reaching back in. "You are alive." He pulled her out with both arms, her body light as a sack of grain. She was shaking, teeth chattering, but her eyes stayed locked on him. Wide, green, and full of something that ran deeper than fear. He laid her gently on the ground, pulling off his duster and wrapping it around her. "What is your name?" he asked. Her lips moved. "Adaline," she said, voice hoarse. Adaline rose. He stared at her. That name, it struck something deep, a memory. A girl with wild hair and scraped knees running through wheat fields near San Carlos, laughing as he chased her. "Adaline, from the reservation school," he said slowly, kneeling beside her. She nodded, and a tear slid down her cheek. "You gave me your apple when I had nothing to eat. You were the only one who was kind." Isaiah's heart twisted. He remembered now. She had been just a girl, sent west after her parents died in the war. He had been 12, she 10. He had never seen her again after that summer, until now. "You were buried alive," he said quietly, brushing sweat and dirt from her forehead. "Who did this to you?" She closed her eyes, voice barely a breath. "They thought I was dead, but I wasn't. I woke up, in the dark." "Who?" he pressed. "Sheriff's men. Someone paid them. I saw them. Faces, I do not know why." Her voice broke, and she turned her face into his palm. Isaiah stood fast, jaw tight. He had seen bad things in his life, but this was evil. "We are getting you out of here," he said. "Now?" He picked her up again, carried her to his horse, and lifted her carefully into the saddle. She leaned against him, weak but breathing steady now, her hands clutching his shirt like she was afraid he would disappear. They rode east, toward the cabin he kept near Red Mesa, where no one would find them. The ride took over an hour, and she faded in and out of sleep, murmuring his name like a prayer. By the time they arrived, the sun was sinking low behind the cliffs. Isaiah carried her inside, laying her gently on the narrow bed against the far wall. He knelt beside her, brushing her hair back, his hands shaking. "You are safe now," he said. Adaline's eyes fluttered open. "Why did you come?" "I do not know," he admitted. "But I am glad I did." She smiled faintly, her fingers reaching for his. "You saved me." He held her hand tight. "I am not going anywhere." The next morning, she woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of a fire crackling. Isaiah was by the hearth, cooking something over the flame, his shirt sleeves rolled up and his hat hanging on a peg. She sat up slowly, pain tugging at her ribs. He turned fast when he heard her move. "You need to lie back," he said, crossing the room. She shook her head. "I need to know what happened." Isaiah crouched beside her again. "We will figure it out, but first you need food, water, time." She looked at him closely, like she was trying to believe he was real. "Why are you helping me?" He looked away, jaw tight. "Because no one helped my mother when she needed it. She died alone. I swore I would never let that happen to someone again." Adaline reached for his hand. "You are not the boy I remember." He met her gaze. You are not the girl I remember either." They stared at each other for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it hit him square in the chest. Over the next 3 days, Adaline grew stronger. She told him pieces of what happened, how she had come west with a preacher's wife looking for work, how she had started teaching children in a mining town, how she had spoken up when the preacher's son tried to hurt one of the girls. And then one night, she had fallen ill, or so she thought. Next thing she knew, she woke in a box. Isaiah listened, fury simmering behind his calm. "I do not know who wanted me dead," she said finally, "but I think they paid someone to make it happen." Isaiah stood pacing. "Do you remember which town?" "Dry Fork," she said quietly. He nodded. "I will ride there tomorrow. Ask questions." She grabbed his hand. "Do not go alone." He looked at her, then slowly sat beside her. "You are not safe here alone either," her fingers laced with his. "Then take me with you." He stared at her. "You just got out of a coffin," she smiled, soft but fierce, "and I am not going back in." Isaiah's throat tightened. He had not known how much he missed hearing someone laugh until now. "All right," he said. "We ride at dawn." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you, Isaiah." He wrapped his arm around her and held her close. "You do not have to thank me. You are not alone anymore." And he meant it. They rode out before the sun had fully crested the hills, Adaline wrapped in Isaiah's spare coat, her hair pinned back from her face, rifle slung across her lap, though her hands trembled lightly on the stock. Isaiah didn't mention it. He only adjusted the saddlebag straps and handed her a strip of dried meat, nodding once before they set off west. The trail to Dry Fork cut through a narrow gorge, the kind where sound carried and shadows didn't leave till midday. They kept a steady pace, Isaiah glancing behind them often, eyes drawn to any sign of dust rising from the trail. Adaline stayed quiet until the canyon opened wide again and the land spread into blanched flats dotted with mesquite. "Do you believe in signs?" she asked, not looking at him. Isaiah's brow creased. "Depends on the day." "I heard a whippoorwill when I woke in that box," she said, voice low. "There shouldn't have been one out there, not in the heat, but it was singing." "Maybe it flew low to warn you," Isaiah offered. She met his gaze for a beat. "Or to call someone." He didn't answer, but he didn't look away. Dry Fork came into view by mid-afternoon, a scatter of low buildings huddled around a dry well and a crooked telegraph pole. A saloon leaned pitchward on the north end, and the sheriff's office squatted beside a feed store with its shutters drawn. A dog barked once and fell quiet. They tied the horses in back of the livery stable and made for the general store first. Isaiah motioned for her to stay just inside the door while he walked toward the counter. The man behind it, a thin fellow with a wide jaw and white suspenders, nodded when he saw Isaiah. "Help you, stranger. Looking for a girl used to teach the miners' children out near the ridge." Preacher's wife brought her in, might have gone by Adaline Rose. The man scratched his chin. "Pretty little thing, green eyes, quiet." Isaiah gave one slow nod. "Thought she died," the man said. "Fever took her fast. They buried her 2 days later. Whole town heard about it. Shame, too. Kids liked her." Isaiah's jaw worked once, then he asked, "Who buried her?" "Sheriff's boys, I reckon. Didn't see it myself." The man leaned on the counter. "You a kin, old friend?" Adaline stepped forward, face pale but steady. "Do you remember who sent for the coffin?" The man blinked. "Ma'am, do you remember?" she repeated, firmer. He looked between them, then nodded slowly. "Was the undertaker from Yuma, but preacher's son paid for it. Real insistent, too, had it sent out same day she took sick." Isaiah's eyes narrowed. "Where's this preacher's son now?" "Stays in the boarding house up the hill, runs collections on Sundays, preaches when his father's traveling." Adaline's mouth was pressed into a flat line. "He tried to touch one of the girls. I told his father. Next day, I woke up in the dark." Isaiah's hand settled over hers where it rested on the counter. She didn't pull away. The storekeeper cleared his throat. "If what you're saying's true, maybe you ought to talk to the sheriff." "No," Isaiah said. We'll handle it quiet. They left the store without another word and climbed the hill behind the livery, where the boarding house stood with lace curtains in the windows and a white painted porch gone soft at the edges. Adaline stayed behind the water barrel while Isaiah knocked. A woman with gray streaked hair and a flour-dusted apron opened the door. Rooms are full, she said before he could speak. I'm looking for a man named Lee Mercer. She narrowed her eyes. You the law? No, Isaiah said. Just need to ask him about a coffin. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Top of the stairs, second door. Isaiah turned once to glance back at Adaline. She gave a single nod. He found the door unlocked. Lee Mercer was hunched over a desk, pen in hand, Bible open beside him. He looked up, startled. You Mercer? That's right. You ordered a coffin for a woman who wasn't dead. Mercer stood. I don't know what you've been told, but Isaiah crossed the room in 2 steps and slammed him back against the wall, forearm pressed to his throat. She woke up. Mercer's face went white. I swear I only did what I was told. By who? My father, Mercer gasped. He said it would ruin us if word got out. He said she was already gone. Isaiah stepped back. You drugged her. Mercer sagged down the wall, coughing. He gave me the powder. I didn't know it wouldn't kill her. Adaline's voice came from the doorway. But you buried me anyway. Mercer froze. His eyes darted to her and then back to Isaiah. She's supposed to be dead. Isaiah drew his revolver. She isn't. Adaline walked forward, slow and steady. You're going to write a letter. You'll tell the governor what your father did, and you'll put your name on it. Mercer opened his mouth, then closed it again. If I do that, they'll hang him. Adaline's voice didn't waver. Then let them. He wrote the letter. Isaiah made sure of it. They left Dry Fork that night, the moon sharp above them, the trail quiet. When they stopped to water the horses, Adaline stood beside Isaiah, eyes on the ribbon of stars overhead. You believed me, she said. Isaiah didn't look away from the sky. I never doubted. She turned toward him. You would have made things easier. Most things worth doing aren't easy, he said. She stepped closer. What happens now? Isaiah met her eyes. Whatever you want. She reached for his hand, her fingers warm against his. I want to go home, she said. Wherever that is. He tightened his grip. Then we'll build one. And beside the slow hush of the wind in the cottonwoods, she leaned into him, and he let her. The land east of Dry Fork stretched long and lean, scattered with greasewood and the occasional bluff where cattle trails cut faint lines through the dust. They didn't speak much on the ride back. Adaline rode steady, her back straight despite the ache she didn't name, her eyes fixed ahead. Isaiah stayed close, his rifle tied behind his saddle but his gaze sharper than before. By the second evening, they reached his cabin again. The door creaked in the wind, left ajar by some careless passing breeze, but nothing inside had been touched. Adaline stepped in first and moved to the window, her shoulders only easing when she saw everything as they'd left it. Isaiah set down the saddle bags and walked to the hearth, checking the flue, the ashes, the kindling stacked dry in the corner. You think they'll come looking? She asked. No one in Dry Fork has the stomach to chase that truth, he said. But fear makes folks foolish. She pulled the curtains closed and turned to him. I don't want to live in fear. You won't, he said. She crossed the floor slowly, stopping in front of him. You said we'd build something. I meant it. A silence stretched between them, the kind that didn't ask to be filled. Then she reached for his hand, placed hers against his palm. I don't want to leave, she whispered. You don't have to. She lowered her head, let her forehead rest against his chest. I don't know what comes next. Whatever it is, he said, we'll meet it. That night, Adaline sat on the porch after supper, legs tucked beneath her, Isaiah beside her sharpening his knife by lantern light. The air had cooled, the kind of quiet that came only after long rides and longer reckonings. She watched the dark settle over the low hills. I used to think I'd end up in a city. Teaching, maybe, somewhere with sidewalks. Isaiah didn't look up. You still could, she shook her head. No. That was before. There's something here, she paused, searching for it, something honest. He set the blade aside and leaned back against the post. Truth's hard out here, but it stays put, doesn't shift like it does in towns. She turned toward him. You always talk like the land raised you. It did, he said. My mother died when I was 15. After that, I worked fence lines and cattle drives, slept under the sky more than under a roof. Who taught you to raid? An old army chaplain. I helped him dig a well one winter, and he gave me books after supper. Adaline smiled, her fingers tracing the grain of the porch rail. You surprise me. You've surprised me since the moment I saw you again, he said. She looked up. I thought I was dying in that box. But I held onto the sound of your name. His voice dropped low. I don't know why I was nearby. I wasn't supposed to be. Maybe the land brought you, she said. His eyes never left hers. Maybe you called. She reached for his hand again. This time he didn't let go. They spent the next week steadying the cabin. Isaiah repaired the roof where the last storm had peeled back the shingles. Adaline cleared the garden patch behind the shed, turning the soil with a rusted spade until her hands blistered. She planted beans and corn in neat rows. He built a coop from scrap lumber they hauled together from an abandoned line shack 5 miles north. Each evening, they sat close by the fire, the silence between them no longer uncertain. He taught her to load his rifle. She read to him from the book the chaplain had given him, dog-eared, spine cracked, letters faded along the edges. One morning she came in from the garden with dirt on her cheeks and a feather tucked behind her ear. There's a spring behind the ridge, she said. Clean water. Cold as anything. Isaiah looked up from the saddle he was mending. You found it, she nodded. I want to build a trough, maybe keep a few goats. He stood, brushing off his hands. Then we'll build it. That evening she sat beside him, her head resting against his shoulder. You know, she said, I don't miss the sound of bell towers or train whistles. I don't miss the road, he said. She looked up at him, her eyes quiet but sure. I want to marry you. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he took her hand, turned it in his, and kissed her knuckles. I was waiting for the right time to ask, he said. She laughed softly and kissed his cheek, her lips brushing the line of his jaw. Now's right. They married under the cottonwoods behind the cabin, just the two of them, with a Bible between their hands and the wind in their hair. Isaiah wore his cleanest shirt. Adaline wore a blue ribbon she'd found in the bottom of her old satchel. He looked at her like she was the first warm sunrise after a long winter. She looked at him like she'd never known safety until now. And when they stepped inside that evening, the door closed behind them with the softest click, like the land itself had let out a breath. The rains came late that year, rolling in from the south with a heaviness that soaked the earth and slowed the mornings. Isaiah patched the roof in places where the new shingles had warped, and Adaline laid oilcloth beneath the windows until the worst of the leaks could be sealed. The smell of wet cedar clung to the cabin walls for days. On the 5th morning of rain, she found him out by the shed, sawing planks from a fallen juniper he'd dragged in before the storm. His shirt stuck to his back, hair dark with sweat even in the chill. She stepped through the mud with a kettle in hand. You'll ruin your arm working in this, she said, holding out the tin cup he always used. He took it, eyes fixed on the board. It's nearly through, just needs the brace fitted. She watched him for a moment, then knelt beside the pile of scrap and pulled out a smaller board. If we cut this down, it could hold the hinge steady. Isaiah looked at her, rain running down his jaw. You figuring on building now? No, she said, just helping. They worked until the light shifted, not speaking much. When the brace finally held, Isaiah rested his hand on the new door frame and nodded once. That evening, with the fire drying their boots near the hearth, she unfolded a letter she'd kept folded in the lining of her satchel. The ink had faded, but the writing was still clear. My sister's in Prescott, she said, holding it out to him. I haven't seen her since before the war. Isaiah set his mug down. You want to find her? I want her to know I'm alive. He took the letter, scanned the address. "We'll ride out when the ground firms." She leaned forward. "I don't want to bring her here, not yet, but maybe if she's safe, it'll be enough." "She'll want to see your face," he said. Adaline tucked the letter back into its place. "I don't know what she'll want. We were different even as girls. She stayed behind when I left with the preacher's wife. I never wrote her back after the first year." Isaiah didn't ask why. He only reached across the table and touched the edge of her hand. The rain lifted 3 days later. The air turned crisp, and the soil released a smell of mesquite and wet stone. They rode out at dawn, Isaiah with his saddle rifle strapped tight, Adaline wrapped against the wind. The trail to Prescott ran through higher country, the hills stitched with piñon and tall grass, herds of mule deer flashing white as they vanished into the trees. They stopped before sundown beneath a notch of red cliffs. Isaiah cleared a space for the fire, and Adaline unrolled their blankets without being asked. As flames took hold, she held her palms near the heat, her face lined with the quiet of worn thoughts. "I dreamed of a porch swing once," she said. "One that didn't creak, just moved with the breeze." Isaiah stirred the coals. "Wood's easy, we'll make one." She smiled faintly, not looking at him. "I used to think I needed people around me all the time. Laughter, voices, motion. Now I think I just needed someone to stay." He handed her a slice of bread warmed on the stone. "I'm not going anywhere." They reached Prescott after 2 days' ride, the town busy with freighters and wagons stalled near the mercantile. Adaline's sister worked as a seamstress in a shop that faced the main street, a narrow window lined with lace collars and muslin dresses pinned to forms. Adaline hesitated at the door. "She might not forgive me." Isaiah stepped behind her, his voice low. "You're not the girl who left." "She'll see that." A bell rang as she stepped inside. The woman behind the counter looked up, dark-haired, her mouth parting in shock before she set her scissors down. They didn't speak for a long time. Then, softly, "Addie," Adaline nodded once. "Hello, Ruth." Ruth came around the counter and reached for her, arms stiff at first, then tight. Isaiah stepped back, letting the door swing closed behind him. He waited outside, watching the street, the slow pass of wagons and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. When Adaline came out an hour later, her eyes were red, but her shoulders held straighter. "She's married to a man who runs freight down to Tucson. They've got 2 boys. Isaiah nodded. "She asked why I never wrote. I told her the truth." "You want to stay a few days?" "No," she said. "I want to go home." They left Prescott before nightfall, the sky clear behind them. Adaline rode close, her coat buttoned to the neck, and Isaiah reached over once, his hand brushing hers as they climbed the ridge. She looked at him. "I didn't know people could make you feel found again." He didn't answer. He just held her hand the rest of the way up the hill. By the time they returned to the cabin, the garden rose had sprouted thin green shoots pushing through damp soil, stubborn and alive. Adaline stepped off her horse slowly, eyes catching on the tremble of wind across the corn tips. She rubbed her lower back, weary from the ride, but her mouth curved not quite a smile, not quite anything else. Isaiah unsaddled both horses without a word. The quiet between them wasn't heavy. It had settled into something familiar, like the hush before rain or the pause after a story ends. Inside, the firebox held the faint smell of charred pine. Adaline ran her hand over the table, dust clinging to her fingers. "I want to add a room," she said, looking toward the far wall. "There's enough space if we shift the cot and tear out that back panel." Isaiah leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You thinking to build it or draw the plans and let me swing the hammer?" She turned her head just enough to meet his eyes. "Both," he nodded once. "We'll start when the ground dries." That night, she pulled her chair closer to the fire and stitched a sleeve torn during the ride. Isaiah rested on the floor nearby, one boot off, mending a strap on his saddlebag. Rain tapped gently against the roof. "You ever think about your mother?" she asked, threading the needle without looking up. "Most days," he said, Not in ways I used to. There's less ache now, more shape to her memory. Adaline glanced toward him. Do you remember her voice? She sang sometimes when she cooked. Nothing with words. She nodded slowly, tying off the thread. I've tried to remember my father's laugh. I think I lost it. Some things come back, Isaiah said, setting the leather aside. Not whole, but enough. She met his gaze across the fire. What would you want to remember of this? If you were far from it, years from now. He didn't answer right away. Then he stood, crossed to her, and sank to one knee beside the chair. This, he said quietly, the way you look at me when we're just breathing the same air. She touched his face, fingers tracing the line beneath his eye. I want to grow old with you, Isaiah. You will, he said. We'll ride less and plant more, build that room, maybe two. She laughed, soft and surprised. You think we'll need two? He took her hand in both of his. I think this place will hold more than just us before long. She leaned down and kissed him, slow and sure. His arms wrapped around her waist, and for a long while neither moved nor spoke. The room warmed, not just from the fire. Spring gave way to a dry summer, and the fields thickened. Adaline's hands grew calloused trimming beans, gathering eggs from the hens they traded for in Prescott. Isaiah built the extra room before the first frost, a square space with a window cut to catch the morning sun. He carved a wooden chair for her, shaped to fit her back. She painted the shutters blue, and he never mentioned the streak she left across her cheek. He just wiped it gently with the edge of his sleeve. One evening, as they walked the ridge behind the cabin, she paused, pressing his hand to her belly. There's a rhythm, she whispered. Like a bird's wings. Isaiah went still. Then he dropped to a knee, rested his ear against her, and closed his eyes. That's ours, he said. That heartbeat. She knelt with him, arms around his shoulders. We'll raise this child here, on honest land. He kissed her temple. With your fire and my quiet, they'll learn everything that matters. The first snow came early that year. They spent the days stacking wood, sealing the windows, preparing the cradle Isaiah built from juniper cut near the spring. He lined it with wool, sanded it smooth, and carved her initials into the headboard. When the baby came a girl with dark curls and eyes clear as creek water, Adaline held her close and whispered, You were always meant to be. Isaiah stood beside them, hands steady, eyes full. They named her Miriam, after Adaline's mother. Years passed. The garden grew wider. The goats multiplied. Isaiah built a second cradle when Miriam outgrew the first. Adaline taught her letters using the same book Isaiah had once been given. They read by lamplight, her voice soft, his hand always resting somewhere near. Neighbors came to know them not as the quiet man and the woman who once vanished, but as Isaiah and Adaline Thorne, who built something from nothing and made it into everything. One spring evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge and cast the cabin in gold, Adaline stood with her arms around Isaiah's waist, their daughter chasing fireflies barefoot in the yard. This is the porch swing I wanted, she said, swaying gently. He pulled her closer. And it doesn't creak. No, she said. It just moves with the breeze. They sat that way until the stars came out, warm and together, the land around them quiet and whole, nothing missing, nothing undone, and they never left.